Let's start with an apple, and a really, really sharp knife. Holding the knife, you slice the apple in two, then into quarters, and then eighths. Each slice makes smaller and smaller pieces until, after 14 cuts, a pattern emerges. You see that the smooth apple flesh is made up of plant cells. You keep going, slicing down to smaller parts of the cells. Another 8 cuts break down the cells into molecules of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. A few more cuts, and what was once an apple is now a massive collection of atoms, about 10 to the power of 27 of them. Is that it? Can you keep cutting? With your knife still sharp, you cut into the atom itself, stripping away the cloud of electrons to reach the atomic nucleus, which is 100 trillion times smaller than the apple you started with. But you press on. The nucleus splits into protons and neutrons, which you then break down into quarks and gluons. At this subatomic level, you're in a world of fuzzy probabilities, with the apple reduced to a wave across a field of forces. It feels like you've reached the limit, the fundamental pieces of the universe. But some scientists believe you can still go deeper. After more than 100 cuts, you might reveal that even point-like quarks and electrons are actually vibrating strings, smaller than a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a meter. At this depth, space and time themselves might be made of indivisible blocks, or reality could even vanish into a mathematical structure, revealing a simulated cosmos or a holographic universe. But which is the truth? And how can we know for sure? To truly understand reality and the nature of existence, we need to ask the hard questions. Is the apple real? You can hold it, smell it, and taste it. Its green skin reflects the sunlight. But what does it mean to be real? What is reality itself? Isaac Newton, when he wanted to remember a phrase or word from his books, would fold down the page corner to mark it. It was easier for him to focus without the distractions we have today. The first layer. To our ancient ancestors, reality seemed straightforward. From the African plains to Europe's snowy forests, reality was what they could see, hear, touch, and taste. It was the snap of a twig, signaling a possible meal, or danger. Sensing reality was essential for survival. Our distant ancestors might not have had much time to ponder the world around them, but as human minds evolved, so did their concept of reality. We know humans began to bury their dead around 100,000 years ago, showing that they thought deeply about life and perhaps even an afterlife. These early ceremonies suggest that ancient humans may have believed there was more to reality than what met the eye, a world beyond their senses, with spirits, gods, and powerful, invisible forces. These early questions about life and the universe have driven humanity's quest to understand reality ever since. Alongside questions of purpose and meaning, the gods also gifted humanity with the apple, a delicious fruit meant for sustenance and enjoyment. For our ancestors, there was no need to question the apple's reality beyond this. Its essence was seen as rooted in divine thought, beyond human understanding. One of history's most renowned philosophers, Plato, lived in Athens during the 4th century BC, known by his nickname Plato, which referred to his broad build. His real name was Aristocles. Plato was deeply concerned with the material world and often questioned the source of an object's physical properties, like the greenness of an apple's skin or why dogs have 4 legs. In his philosophy, Plato argued that our world was not the real world and introduced his famous allegory of the cave to explain this. He asked us to imagine a dark cave where prisoners, chained and facing a wall, had never seen the world outside. They could only see shadows cast on the wall by sunlight filtering through the cave's entrance. To them, these shadows represented reality, as it was all they had ever known. But Plato extended the thought experiment. What if the cave's entrance were blocked and only a fire illuminated the wall? Now, mischievous figures could manipulate shadows, creating stories and images of things the prisoners had never experienced: battles, monsters, castles. For the prisoners, these projections would be indistinguishable from their reality. To them, these images would be just as real as the previous shadows. Plato argued that we, too, are like these prisoners. What we perceive is merely a shadow of a truer, more perfect reality. This allegory was surprisingly insightful, given what we now know about reality, but it marked only the beginning of humanity's quest to uncover the universe's mysteries. To truly understand the nature of existence, we would eventually need to go beyond gods or ancient philosophy and explore the fundamental structures of matter, space, and time through scientific discovery. And as science began to peel away reality's layers, things only grew stranger. The poet John Keats, who died young in 1821, expressed a sentiment about science's impact on beauty. He wrote of how philosophy will clip an angel's wings and unweave a rainbow. Keats, like many poets and thinkers, lamented how science seemed to unravel the mystery behind nature's wonders. He criticized Isaac Newton for reducing the magic of a rainbow to the dispersion of light through a prism, robbing it of its mystical allure. Keats's lament highlighted a broader conflict. By revealing the physical laws underlying the world, science, led by Newton and others, began a tradition of exposing reality's underlying structures. Newton's breakthroughs, especially in understanding light, spearheaded this shift. When he showed that sunlight could be split into the colors of the rainbow, he began the scientific pursuit of explaining even the most beautiful phenomena through observable, predictable principles. This drive to unweave the rainbow launched a tradition that pushed science to examine every layer of existence, stripping away surface appearances to understand the forces and particles that compose reality itself. If we think again about the apple, one of its defining features is its colorful skin. But where, exactly, does that color reside? To understand color, we must explore what makes the apple appear green, and the journey begins with the story of a man often called the last man who knew everything. Thomas Young was born in the small Somerset town of Milverton in 1773. An intellectual prodigy, Young quickly mastered multiple languages, including French, Greek, Italian, Latin, Aramaic, and Persian, and played a pivotal role in deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphics after the Rosetta Stone was discovered. Young's name is particularly famous in science for his groundbreaking double-slit experiment, a concept at the heart of our understanding of light and reality. We will revisit this experiment later. Before Young, artists had long known that mixing colors produced new ones, and that three specific colors, red, green, and blue, were crucial. Young proposed that the eye contains three types of cells, now called cone cells, each sensitive to one of these colors. The brain then mixes the signals from these cells to create our perception of color. However, other animals see the world quite differently. While humans, apes, and Old World monkeys share similar color sensitivity, most mammals only detect two color bands, missing the richness of human color perception. For instance, bees have three receptors, but instead of red, their vision spans blue, green, and ultraviolet. Certain reptiles, fish, and birds can have up to 4 or more receptors, while the mantis shrimp, famously, has 12. These species perceive a color spectrum vastly different from ours. This array of perceptions reveals something profound about reality. Color exists not as an objective quality, but as a subjective experience shaped by the brain. Just as colors are interpreted in our minds, sounds are similarly subjective. They're simply the brain's interpretation of air pressure waves vibrating the eardrums. Reality, then, is like a virtual simulation crafted by our minds. Given this, if we can't rely on our senses to perceive the true nature of reality, can we trust space and time? At least we can be certain of the here and now, or can we? Following Young and Newton's insights, science led to a revolution where even time and space would be questioned. The fabric of reality, space-time. Time once ticked more slowly. In 2023, astronomers used quasars, enormous black holes from 12 billion years ago, to measure how time progressed when the universe was young. These quasars emit intense light, which fades and flares regularly. By analyzing this quasar tick and comparing it to modern measurements, scientists discovered that time was ticking at 1/5 of its current rate when the universe was just 1/10 of its age. This cosmic dilation was predicted by mathematical laws dating back more than a century. Descartes and the coordinate system. The French philosopher René Descartes, famous for "I think, therefore I am," had insights beyond philosophy. In 1619, while recovering in his room, Descartes observed a fly and wondered how he might describe its movement mathematically. He realized that by designating a reference point, say, a room corner, he could describe the fly's position with 3 numbers. This system of 3 coordinates remains foundational in physics and mathematics today, forming the basis for what's known as the Cartesian coordinate system. Descartes' ideas laid the groundwork for Isaac Newton, who further developed the laws of motion in his classical mechanics. In Newton's model, time was absolute, a universal clock that everyone agreed on. Space was slightly more complex, as each observer could define their own coordinate system, following ideas from Galileo, who thought in terms of real-life scenarios like ships at sea rather than abstract math. Like when people in different cities around the world watch the countdown to the new year, synchronized at midnight. But according to Einstein, this synchronization is only apparent. For observers moving at different speeds or in different gravitational fields, the perception of time changes, and so two events that seem simultaneous in one reference frame may not be in another. This array of perceptions reveals something profound about reality. Color exists not as an objective quality, but as a subjective experience shaped by the brain. Just as colors are interpreted in our minds, sounds are similarly subjective. They're simply the brain's interpretation of air pressure waves vibrating the eardrums. Reality, then, is like a virtual simulation crafted by our minds. Given this, if we can't rely on our senses to perceive the true nature of reality, can we trust space and time? At least we can be certain of the here and now, or can we? Following Young and Newton's insights, science led to a revolution where even time and space would be questioned. The fabric of reality, space-time. Time once ticked more slowly. In 2023, astronomers used quasars, enormous black holes from 12 billion years ago, to measure how time progressed when the universe was young. These quasars emit intense light, which fades and flares regularly. By analyzing this quasar tick and comparing it to modern measurements, scientists discovered that time was ticking at 1/5 of its current rate when the universe was just 1/10 of its age. This cosmic dilation was predicted by mathematical laws dating back more than a century. This idea of relativity goes even deeper when considering gravity. Einstein continued to develop his theories, and in 1915 he published the general theory of relativity, which showed that gravity is not a force pulling objects together, as Newton had proposed, but rather a distortion in the fabric of space and time itself. According to general relativity, massive objects like planets and stars warp space-time around them, and this curvature guides the paths that other objects take, like the Earth orbiting the Sun or an apple falling to the ground. A dramatic consequence of this is that time itself is affected by gravity, something called gravitational time dilation. The stronger the gravitational field, the slower time passes relative to regions with weaker gravity. This effect has been confirmed by experiments, such as those involving highly accurate atomic clocks placed at different altitudes. The clock closer to the Earth, in a stronger gravitational field, ticks more slowly than one higher up. So, the nature of reality as we understand it has become fundamentally dynamic and relative, rather than absolute. Space and time stretch, warp, and weave together in response to the presence of mass and energy. Our experience of the world is shaped by this flexible fabric of space-time, yet it is not something we perceive directly. Instead, it is through the precise, elegant, and sometimes startling mathematics of relativity that we uncover the underlying nature of reality. Our perception, whether of colors or of time, is just a constructed experience based on the information our brains process. Reality itself, as revealed through the work of figures like Descartes, Newton, Maxwell, and Einstein, is far richer, stranger, and more interconnected than we could have imagined from our ordinary senses alone. To dismantle the universe, or to understand what it's truly made of, we'd have to dive into the fundamental components that make up everything we see, and even the things we don't. The universe at its core is constructed of fundamental particles and forces, which, when assembled in countless combinations, give rise to atoms, molecules, and ultimately all matter. The smallest units of matter, like electrons, quarks, and photons, are governed by the forces that interact with them. These forces are encapsulated in the standard model of particle physics, which includes electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. Each of these plays a unique role. The electromagnetic force holds electrons in atoms, while the strong force binds quarks together to form protons and neutrons, and the weak force enables radioactive decay. But the universe isn't only composed of what we can see. In fact, much of it, around 85%, is made of dark matter, an invisible and mysterious substance that interacts gravitationally but not with light, rendering it undetectable by traditional means. Dark matter holds galaxies together, preventing them from flying apart despite their high rotation speeds. And then there's dark energy, a form of energy that's thought to be responsible for the accelerated expansion of the universe, making up about 70% of the universe's total content. Together, dark matter and dark energy shape the cosmos in ways that are still largely unexplained. Now, if we look even closer, recent theories like string theory suggest that these particles aren't the most fundamental entities after all. Instead, they might be tiny, vibrating strings of energy, each vibrating at a different frequency to produce the diversity of particles. This theory could unify the forces of nature under one framework, suggesting that everything, from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy, is interconnected at a fundamental level. And so, the universe, dismantled to its smallest parts, is an intricate web of particles, forces, and possibly even dimensions beyond our perception. Our everyday experiences, like the pull of gravity, the warmth of the sun, or the sensation of holding an apple, are the cumulative effects of this underlying structure. And at its heart, reality is not a single, absolute thing but rather a complex and layered interplay of forces and particles, energy and space, bound by the rules of physics that Einstein and others have only begun to reveal.